welcome to today's session. Today we're going to focus on safety. So we're going to talk about new tools for safer intersections that are available today. A lot of safety can be complex. I'm glad I'm not a traffic agency. Just diving into this topic, it is a lot to cover. So we're going to try and do our best to cover it in a nice hour today, but also give you time for questions at the end. So one of the questions I had is, how do we motivate for safer behavior? So I have kids. I have an 11-year-old. He's not always safe. So we try to motivate him to do safe things. And I couldn't imagine doing this for an entire demographic of people. So how do we motivate people to all drive in a safer manner? So looking at this, there were a lot of examples I could have taken. If you were at ITS last week and you had the benefit of going to the Ford Motor Museum, which I attended, one of the areas there is about seatbelts. What is seatbelt usage? So I partnered up with ChatGPT and we did a research project on this. Took us a couple hours. This is seatbelt usage plotted over time. The colors took an interesting turn in somehow the slide conversion here. But if you look at the history of it, and we got a slide on all the events that had to happen, this is just looking at some of the highlighted time, some of the highlighted dates. So the seatbelts were first invented in 1885. There was a patent, first U.S. safety belt patent. It takes 100 years, 1985, and we're at like 15% usage. And you look at all the things that happened in the meantime. So you have physicians advocating for it. So that's like modern day influencers. You've got manufacturing integrating the seatbelts. You've got racing instituting seatbelts. But then I thought about, well, we don't wear helmets when we drive cars, and they wear helmets when they're racing. But you've got all of these elements that are being built into this, but nothing really turns the needle until you get enforcement. So kind of one of those examples where you had to have government enforcement, specifically state level enforcement, to see the graph shift. And then from about 85, 86 to 95, 96, we see a pretty big increase in usage. That's when Click It or Ticket starts, is 1993. We turn that on, but we're already at 66%. So 2 out of 3 people in a car are using a seatbelt, which is a good thing. Today we're above 90%. But when you look at all the body of information that had to happen, there's a lot of work just to get people to click a seatbelt in their car. Obviously, there were financial incentives going on to some degree, not throughout this entire period. On the next slide here, we kind of look at an example of some of those. Oh, that's interesting, a little fuzzy. Section 402 is pretty broad in its scope. It wasn't specific to seatbelts, but it does have some element there. But look at all that had to happen, right? So you've got innovation and technology adoption. You got influencers. You've got national law, state laws. You got enforcement. You got Click It or Ticket. Educational campaigns. It's a lot going on. And a lot of different elements have to all play a role. So when we kind of summarize this, we sort of break it into 4 pillars. There we go. We have funding, which is always helpful. It's always good to have funding because we have activities that are not inside our normal budget and not inside our normal scope. So we need to have funding help. Enforcement. It's an unfortunate fact that without enforcement, a lot of times we don't change our behavior. Data and tracking. So none of these programs require data. And what's interesting with seatbelts is we had targets around seatbelt usage. And so how do you track that? How do you get a data set on that? Because if you're only tracking when the police pulls you over for not wearing a seatbelt, that's going to be a very low number. So how do you get a good number on seatbelt usage? And then, of course, education and trying to get this out. And then there's one more element. So if you joined us last month for our webinar on optimization, which is available on YouTube, and this one will be available on YouTube as well. I just saw a question come in on that. So yes, we will have the slides available for you, but we will have the video so you can watch this. We studied optimization. We talked about one of our sites, Kelowna, British Columbia. There's a recent report issued by an insurance company. ICBC, there it is. They looked at crash data and they were comparing 2024 data with 2025 data. And they saw some interesting comparison. So if you took the optimized corridors, they saw a decline in crashes by 11.4%. Now, the whole city saw a slight decline as well of 1.8%, which is great news. But you have an order of magnitude different performance for optimized intersections. That's pretty interesting. You also see a decline in red light running, a 6.5%, and this is with volumes increasing. So in spite of volumes increasing. So when we talk to this traffic agency specifically about this, they've optimized corridors to the north and to the south of a highway. What is happening is that the highway gets backed up and people are offloading onto those side corridors. And because the optimization is able to move the traffic through better, they're seeing an increase in volume and they're also seeing a decrease in delay. Now they're seeing a decrease in crashes, decrease in red light running. It's all pretty powerful. And when you look at when commuters are more likely to be on the road between 9 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., the red light running rates go down even more, something between 14 and 37%. So very cool. Obviously, with optimization, we're focused more on traffic flow and moving people through the roads with less delay. But a side effect of doing that and lowering driver frustration can also be safety. So it's kind of a win-win scenario there. So let's take a quick second here to talk about NoTraffic as a company. If you have not heard of NoTraffic, we've been around for almost a decade now, since 2017. We have offices in Tel Aviv and a very rapidly growing office in Kansas City, where our NOC, or NoTraffic Operations Center, is. That's where we handle all of our support calls. We have world's leading AI mobility platform, which is an interesting category because in the industry, a lot of people think of detection. You're going to set up a camera. If you talk to anyone at NoTraffic, we see it 180 degrees different. So we are about setting up a platform, a sort of, you can think of it as like a smartphone where you have apps you could download on your smartphone. You have a similar thing now for traffic. So with the hardware at the intersection and with the advanced level of componentry that we have there in terms of video, in terms of radar, in terms of artificial intelligence processing at the edge, if you want to learn more about that, yes, we have a webinar on that, and it's posted on YouTube. I'm going to be advertising a lot of those webinars today. But with that level of hardware and with that platform, we're able to build upon it mobility operating system. And that operating system allows you to see all your data, and it allows you to access mobility applications. Will's going to go into this in a little bit more detail, but at the highest level of that is this platform idea. We are deployed in 41 states. So it's over 40 states, 4 provinces, which the provinces are pretty big. So that takes care of a lot of geography there. We are approved in pretty much every DOT at this point in time. We're on just about every APL that you could have interest in. More than 400 agencies, and that's growing all the time. These numbers get outdated on a regular basis. So very quickly growing and becoming the default for a lot of agencies. So hopefully we can add to that today and solve some of your safety questions. And to help me do that, let me introduce Will Huang, PE. He's Traffic Solutions Engineer at NoTraffic. His past experiences include Tool Design Group, Jacobs Engineering, and Streetlight Data. He's worked on Complete Streets, Boston Vision Zero, and Safe Routes to School projects. You can see why we chose Will to present this session today. He has a BS and MS in Civil Engineering from Northwestern University. And as mentioned before, he's a licensed professional engineer. So Will, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining our new tools for safer intersections today webinar, where we'll go over different safety initiatives that your agency might be following and how you can use NoTraffic to meet the goals and carry out those asks of those initiatives. So I'll kick it off first by going through some of those safety initiatives that you might be working on yourself, or maybe your agency might have adopted. First one, most common one, Vision Zero, 0 roadway fatalities by a certain year. Could vary which year, depending on your agency, but the goal here is all common, reaching 0 roadway fatalities. And it gets you started, gets you to start thinking about a safe systems approach. How do we get safety on a system level? How do we protect all modes of travel? How do we have safe travel speeds? How do we adjust for human factors? And that's something that's unique to safe systems approach, getting people to start thinking about how human behavior is and accepting that humans actually make mistakes and that no amount of engineering can account for it. You might also have heard of the 5 E's of safety. It's not as common anymore, but it's still good to acknowledge, using education, encouragement, enforcement, evaluation, and engineering to achieve safer mobility. You also have your Complete Streets and your Safe Routes to School programs. They're both initiatives to promote safer roadway designs and equitable designs. So we're not just going to be designing for a typical able-bodied pedestrian anymore. You might have situations where you might need a wider sidewalk for someone in a wheelchair, or maybe a protected cycle track to protect kids going to school. We also have roadway or road safety audits, or RSAs, where folks all gather together to walk corridor, point out safety issues, and identify the proper countermeasures. And then there's also SSA or SS4A, a grant funding opportunity that unfortunately has passed, but it has funding to support planning and implementation of different safety projects across the US. And this is by no means a comprehensive list of the safety initiatives. There's other ones, HSIP being one of them as well. But these are most of the safety initiatives that should encompass most of the work that your agencies are doing. And most of the common questions agencies ask when they're trying to carry out these initiatives, they're usually, how do we plan for safer systems and identify the priorities? How do we design the right and effective solutions here? And how do we measure the outcomes and success? So you have the planning aspect, the engineering aspect, and then the analysis portion at the very end. So planning for safer systems and identifying the priorities. With all these initiatives that are more of a network level, like Vision Zero and Safe Systems, the agency would typically be tasked to identify the high injury network and prioritize the corridors. They will be asked to evaluate speed-related risk factors, identify locations with growing multimodal demands, and also prioritize projects based on risk and benefits. So all of these asks that have the similarities are that you're trying to identify the areas with the highest risk, and then if they were to put investments into fixing and solving those risks, where would they result in the best return on investment or the highest benefit to the community? And with initiatives that are more focused on safety at the actual intersection, like Complete Streets and Safe Routes to School, the agencies might be tasked to evaluate the needs of multimodal roadway users, so bicyclists, pedestrians, transit. They might be tasked to design the safer crossings, improve bicycle connectivity and protect them, develop signal timing strategies to ensure progression, implement traffic calming measures, so adding speed bumps, things like that, and balance safety, accessibility, and mobility objectives. And then lastly, is with the initiatives that are more focused on performance and assessments demonstrating the success of projects, agencies might be tasked to conduct before and after studies, evaluate the operational and safety performance, measure the changes in roadway user activity. So maybe if you put in a bicycle or a cycle track, did bicycle volume increase? Did the amount of bicycle crashes decrease? Things like that. Assess the roadway conflict, near miss and crash reductions, and also monitor the speed and compliance trends. And this is just a snippet of what these initiatives are going to ask these agencies to do. But these are some of the most common tasks. So now you have these tasks, where do you begin? So agencies can start plowing through their existing data. They can identify problems maybe through word of mouth or through 311 calls, but they'll soon quickly realize that there are huge data gaps. And I'll go through some of those examples here of those data gaps. So with an agency, typically with a traditional safety analysis, they'll go through crash reports. And those crash reports, sometimes they can arrive weeks or months after a crash occurs. You know, the police would have to draft up the report. Someone would then have to file it, transcribe it, redact out all the confidential information, and then it gets uploaded to some portal that your agency may or may not have. So these crash reports are commonly outdated or giving you a snapshot of what's been happening in the past and might not be the current situation, which may have gone more dangerous. A lot of dangerous interactions at the intersection might not ever be reported. Sometimes people, if they get into a crash or a near miss, they might just shrug it off if there's no real damage. And that safety issue, while it did not result in a fatal crash or a high severity crash at that moment, might turn into one later on, but you were never aware of it because it was never reported. Sometimes these reports are limited to vehicles only. You might not get the full picture of every single road user there. And if you wanted to do a manual study, they're often very expensive. If you're going to hire a third-party consultant, for example, to sit out at the intersection and make some observations, they're time extensive and they're inconsistent. So if you choose 1 week over another, maybe it's when school's in session versus a summer vacation, you're going to get very different results and it's just going to be a snapshot of time. You're not going to have that continuous understanding of what's going on at the intersection. And then also continuous safety monitoring tools might not be available to some agencies. So how can we take a more proactive step towards safety, towards meeting those needs of those initiatives? We can look at using NoTraffic here. So with NoTraffic, we're here to support the agency's safety initiatives and goals with continuous granular data. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we attain that. If you're unfamiliar with NoTraffic, I'll go into how we're going to deploy our edge devices and continuously monitor and collect that data. You can also identify high-risk intersections faster through our platform. We create nice graphs and charts that can summarize and prioritize intersections for you. We can review contextual video for analyses of various incidents. So if say a police department or the traffic agency, transportation agency wants to recreate a safety incident, they can review the contextual video to have a video of the actual incident and be able to gain insights from that. You can also scale safety monitoring across corridors and networks through more installations, and you can also measure safety trends before and after improvements through our platform. All right. And if there's one takeaway that I want you to have from this webinar, it'd be this, that NoTraffic helps agencies plan safer systems, design safer streets, and measure safety outcomes through continuous multimodal data collection and analysis. So let's talk a little bit more about our NoTraffic AI Mobility Platform. We first talk about our edge devices and our detection. This is the physical hardware that gets installed at the intersection. I'll show you how that looks like in just a moment. Building on top of those edge devices and detection, you'll have our Mobility OS, a cloud-based traffic management platform that you're able to interface with the hardware devices on and gain a lot of that data insights due to the devices being at the intersection and collecting all that metadata on what's going on at the intersection. On Mobility OS, on top of that, you'll have our Mobility Store. It's our on-demand mobility applications. The Mobility Store allows you to have access to all these different applications as they relate to data, safety, and operations. So these three components are really what build our AI mobility platform. The great thing about the NoTraffic platform is that it takes your legacy solutions where you're mix and matching a lot of different hardware that could be made by a bunch of different companies, trying to figure out how they all integrate. If things need to be maintained or something goes down, you're going to have to call a bunch of different people, or maybe your staff might need to get trained on a bunch of different hardware. That it makes it all very confusing and could delay a lot of the work that you might need to do. With a NoTraffic platform, because we have it all, we have our hardware devices and then a bunch of different applications with different use cases built on top of that. It streamlines your processes and your operations at your intersections. So to talk a little bit more about the edge devices and the traffic detection, you have these fused radar video sensors that are installed, one per approach. So we have visuals of the crosswalk, of the approach, and they are there to do stop bar advanced detection and detect any vulnerable roadway users on the roadway as well. And then we also have a Nexus system. That's the central computing unit that is installed at the traffic cabinet. The sensors feed information back to the Nexus, and then the Nexus sends that information up to our cloud. Talk a little bit more about our sensor. It is, again, fused radar video. The radar is 60 gigahertz, and the video is 1080p HD quality. And with this fused technology, we're able to get the location, speed, heading, lane classification of the different objects that you see on roadway, and we're able to penetrate the weather as well. So if you live in a location with heavy sun glare or fog, NoTraffic would be able to penetrate that for the detection of the objects on the roadway. And pointing your attention to the right, just to show you what our camera looks at, each one of those objects have a bounding box around them. You can see the yellow boxes or blue boxes around each object. This demonstrates how we can look at all the objects, classify them, identify what lane they're in, where they are relative to the sensor. And you can see how wide the field of view is and just how many vehicles and objects we can pick up. And again, just to talk a little bit about how they talk to each other, the sensors talk to the Nexus via Wi-Fi or Ethernet. The Nexus sends that information up to Mobility OS through a built-in cellular connection, and then the Nexus connects to the controller through SDLC or NTCIP. If you want to learn more about our detection quality and how it works, we have a separate webinar that is uploaded to YouTube. Mike, I'm helping you out with the promotions there. So give that a watch if you want to learn more about our detection. Going more on top of that, going to the second layer with Mobility OS, our cloud-based traffic management platform. That's where you're able to interface with the hardware and get a lot of insights from the metadata that they're collecting. First one that's available through Mobility OS is our alerts. So this is when we detect an object that has been obstructing the flow of traffic for more than 5 minutes. The agency will be given an alert either through email or through this platform here, and you're able to go and watch a 5-second clip of that obstruction. So this could be anything like landscaping trucks blocking the flow of traffic, construction vehicles, a crash, for example. So as it relates to safety here, you'll be able, agencies say if they are not, if they don't have too extensive of a workforce or monitoring systems, the NoTraffic would be able to let the agency know of these different crashes or different events that may be causing safety issues on a roadway through an alert. And that will then enable the agency to react faster to these different incidences before they turn into a larger situation. For AI detection, here you're able to stream from the lenses of the sensors in a quad view. And if you wanted to zoom in into any one sensor, you're also able to do that here. So we believe that great detection allows for better operations. And in better operations, we believe that encourages safer driving behavior and also encourages alternative modes to utilize the roadways. So if you know that, say, your kid's going to school on a bicycle and you know that an intersection is operating smoothly and they'll get detected and they'll get serviced, you're going to hopefully more likely allow your kid to go to school via bicycle because you trust that the operations are safe for them to get to school. Traffic counts, one of the many asks of these different initiatives. You have to have data, and to have good data will allow you to have better success outcomes and evaluations down the line later. So with traffic counts, you have your NoTraffic installed. You're able to collect the counts for 6 different modes: passenger vehicle, heavy truck, bus, motorcycle, bicycle, and pedestrians. And you're able to get these movements on nice graphs and diagrams as you see on the screen here. We also have data analytics, where we're able to assess the operations of the intersection. You also notice here that there are 2 columns here with similar looking graphs, and that's because you're able to select one time range for the left column and another time range for the right. And so for a lot of these safety initiatives, they're going to be asking agencies to assess how countermeasures that they implemented impacted the operations of the intersection or have improved safety. So all of the NoTraffic applications allow you to compare 2 different time ranges, and that'll really streamline agencies in them assessing the results of their countermeasure implementations. And then to add on top of that, the mobility store, where you're able to access on-demand mobility applications. Here we have a wide variety of different applications for different use cases. Again, they all relate to safety, data, and operations. I'm going to focus on the safety applications here on this webinar. So that would be our optimization mode. That is the adaptive signal control technology that we implement along a corridor. Mike mentioned earlier about how our optimization mode improved the safety of a corridor that was in British Columbia. We also have intersection safety insights. That is our red light running application that can track red light runners and break it down for you in different tiers of egregiousness. We also have our dilemma zone application, our pedestrian protection zone application, and then our near miss insights application. And I'll walk through each one of these applications now. So pedestrian protection, this is a great application to have for locations that or intersections where people are generally walking a little slower. So think about your senior homes, your schools where children are walking a little slower, maybe even stadium events where people might not be following the walk sign or or follow the pedestrian clearing interval. And speaking of that pedestrian clearance time, generally it's based on that walking speed of 2.5 feet per second, but sometimes that might not always be the case. So going back to that safe systems approach for Vision Zero, where we should account for human behavior. Sometimes a pedestrian could be in a rush and they might decide to cross the street at the last minute. And making that decision, we all made that at some point in our lives. That decision shouldn't result in a crash on a roadway. And so implementing the pedestrian protection application here, how that works essentially is we would draw a zone across the crosswalk. And if a pedestrian is detected during the clearance interval and the pedestrian is still there during the clearance interval, we will then implement some sort of control. We will let the controller know that a pedestrian is still crossing and tell the controller to either hold the parallel vehicle phase green to allow the pedestrian more time to finish crossing, or if the controller allows, to extend the crosswalk time to maybe a second max time or something of that sort. So essentially detecting the pedestrian and allowing them more time to finish their crossing. Our next application, Dilemma Zone. So this one is very effective at locations where you might be seeing a lot of rear end crashes or broadside crashes. So the T-bone crashes that you see at the intersection. And the reason for that is because for Dilemma Zone, for those of you who are not familiar with Dilemma Zone, when you're driving down a roadway and you see a yellow light, you're stuck with this dilemma. Do you go or do you advance? If you stop and the person behind you thinks you're going to go, you're going to be causing a rear end crash. If you decide to go, but you time it incorrectly, you might be at risk of running a red light. So hence why I say that Dilemma Zone is a really effective application at locations where there are heavy rear end crashes or T-bone broadside crashes. For Dilemma Zone, what happens here is that if a vehicle is detected going a certain speed in the Dilemma Zone, we will send that input to the controller, and the controller would extend the green so that that vehicle crosses while the light is still green, and not when it turns yellow, forcing them to make that decision. Of course, this is still subject to your max screen time, so it's not going to continuously hold green as vehicles keep getting detected in the Dilemma Zone. The goal here is to mitigate as many vehicles as possible from seeing or being in that Dilemma Zone and seeing that yellow light, forcing them to make that decision. Next application here is Intersection Safety Insights, or our red light running application. For this application, we detect all the different red light runners because we do get the traffic light status, and we also have our radar understanding where the location, speed, and heading of each object is. We put that information together to detect these red light runners, and we break it down into 3 categories here. First category is when a vehicle runs a yellow light, so technically not illegal, but if you see a lot of yellow light runners, you might want to dig into what's going on here. The second category is if a vehicle runs in all red. When it's all red, hopefully the all red is serving its purpose, that the conflicting phase is not green yet, so hopefully it won't create a crash. But if it's running a red light, there is definitely an issue there for the vehicles and the timings. And then lastly, the third category is when a vehicle runs a red when the conflicting phase has a green. So that will definitely lead to your T-bone crashes and your broadside crashes. We'll also have on our landing page a prioritization of the 5 most intersections in your network that has NoTraffic installed of the red light runners, of the highest amount of red light runners. And then we'll break it down by the 3 categories, so then it'll help you prioritize where you should implement your safety countermeasures. Next application here, near miss analytics. So for this one, it is very similar to the red light running application here in terms of setup, where we will give you the applications to help you prioritize different countermeasures. So we'll have a heat map here that can show you the different movements that have the most near misses. And then we'll also break it down by near misses between different modes. So vehicles to vehicles, vehicles to pedestrians, vehicles to bicyclists, for example. And we do this through a combination of post-encroachment time, or PET, and time to collision, or TTC. So 2 different industry standards for understanding near miss activity at an intersection. What I failed to mention earlier too is that for near miss and for our red light running applications, you also get a 5-second clip of the infraction or the incident so that you're able to review these different videos on your own time remotely and make your assessments, aggregate the data, and make your assessments on what kind of countermeasures to implement based on the activity that you're seeing. Lastly, our optimization mode application. So again, that's our adaptive signal control application. If you want to learn more about how this works and how we are able to make your corridor an adaptive corridor, we also have another webinar available on our YouTube page that demonstrates just this. I'm going to be highlighting the safety benefits of optimization mode here at 4 different locations. First one being Kirkland in Quebec. We saw a 27% reduction in red light running. In St. Albert, British Columbia, we saw 33%. In Houston, Texas, we saw 42% reduction in red light running. And we don't necessarily have a solid understanding of why we see this reduction, but our hunch is that because the adaptive signal control application has made progression on the corridor so much better, it reduced some road rage or some anxiety in the drivers, in that then they were more likely to comply with the timings and run the red lights less. In Vancouver, British Columbia, we also noticed a 40% delay in pedestrian delay reduction. So with this one, we implemented NoTraffic at a pedestrian mall. And what happened here is that with the pedestrian delay reduction, we saw a lot of pedestrians before the implementation jaywalking, crossing against the light because they were just waiting at the light for too long. And I myself am guilty of that. When I wait too long at a crosswalk, if I see that there's no vehicles coming, I'm just going to go. And so we saw a lot of that happening in Vancouver. And so we implemented NoTraffic, and we actually saw a 40% pedestrian delay reduction and a better compliance with that walk signal because of that. And so to sum it up again, our AI mobility platform, it consists of these 3 layers here built on our edge devices and detection, the physical hardware at the intersection, doing all this collection of metadata continuously and multimodally. And on top of that, we have our Mobility OS, where we harvest that metadata and showcase it to you on a platform that you're able to access remotely from your desk. And then we also have the Mobility Store built on top of that, where you're able to access more applications as they relate to safety, data, and operations. And lastly, I'd be remiss if I were not to mention our NoTraffic Operations Center. They are really there to support and create a peace of mind for all our agencies. They are a 24/7, 365 operations center that is human staffed in Kansas City, Kansas. And they're there to monitor your systems, make sure that everything is online. And again, we believe that having better detection results in better operation, which results in more compliance and safer intersections. So with the NOC, they're really there and holding down a fort and making sure that the system is running. And a lot of agencies that have worked with our NOC has mentioned that they feel that the NOC is an extension of their team. Some agencies that are short-staffed, or maybe their intersections are really far away, so it takes a lot of time to get to those intersections to troubleshoot any issues. They feel that the NOC was a real value add there for them in that case. And then lastly, the lower cost. When you have a operations center that is able to look at the system and make sure that everything's operating well, you're not waiting for a call from your community letting you know that something is going wrong, and you're not going to be asking your staff to be going out on the roadway and heading to that intersection to then troubleshoot, only to find out that that person might need to go back to grab some equipment and creating more trips than necessary. So at a prior experience or at Jacobs Engineering, one of the things that they always said was the safest trip is the trip not taken. And I believe that NoTraffic Operations Center really enhances that by being able to look at the system and your network and understand what is going on and precisely what needs to be fixed. You're saving yourself a lot of trips by your own staff and putting them and getting them out of harm's way by removing them from the road itself because they don't need to take that trip anymore. So just to wrap it up, there are many safety initiatives out there that ask a lot out of these agencies. And it could be very overwhelming for the agencies to figure out where to start. So what data gaps do they have? How do you figure out the priorities? How do you best design safely and effectively? And then how do you assess those outcomes? And with NoTraffic, we hope to make it easier for agencies to enhance safety on the roadways by supplying this continuous multimodal data and analysis. And we really hope to make your intersection safer wherever we're deployed. And I'll hand it back to Mike.
Yeah, I won't go through all these cards, but I think one of the big themes here, and hopefully you caught on to it if you're joining this, is, traditionally your data for making decisions comes from external sources. So if you need counts, you're going to go hire a consultant who does a study. If you need crash reports, you're waiting for a crash report to come in. What's changed is now you're in control of the data. You're the first primary source of the data. What's interesting is with some of these applications that Will's talking about, now other agencies are coming to the traffic agencies and saying, hey, can you help me with this data? Because traffic agencies are now at point for those data sources. So it's sort of a shift in the movement of where that data rests. And then because this is data that's more tailored toward traffic agencies, it tends to be better at helping you do your job. So for example, crash reports, a lot of that is around insurance companies or police, not necessarily tailored to traffic agencies, and it can miss some areas. This is data specifically tailored toward you as a demographic, as an audience, and it's going to hit and fit what you need better. So I'd say that's probably one of the big shifts that we're kind of seeing here with this. Data is new for some agencies. I would say in general, if you have access to NoTraffic today, or if you have access to a modern detection solution that is generating data, take a look at it. It's priceless. It's amazing what they're putting together now, what we're putting together now. It's a great resource that not everybody uses. So a lot of people put up detection and they think, okay, we have detection. Now it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's like, okay, now open your web browser and start to look at the data, because this data is going to help you go to that next step. And then if you want the data, or if you actually want functionality that you don't have access to, there's that third layer, which is the application layer. So that can help you start to take steps into making things safer, making traffic flow better, getting better intelligence for your local agency or for other agencies that you partner with. So things to think about. Will, I'm going to turn over to you and let you have a final thought on this. Great session today. Great job today.
Thank you. Yeah, final thought. Thanks everyone for attending this call. I'm just going to pan back to that last slide with that takeaway message here. How NoTraffic is really helping agencies. Agencies, they have these initiatives that they're tasked to carry out. There's a lot of asks on those initiatives. There's a lot of things that agencies need to do. And then if agencies go back and try to implement anything, they find that they have a lot of data gaps that they can't overcome. There might be a lot of information that they want to obtain, but they just don't have it. So NoTraffic is really there to bridge that data gap, to provide this continuous multimodal data and analysis that you're able to then access remotely from your desktop. So really cutting down the time it takes to understand the safety issues at an intersection, and then also allowing agencies to better prioritize and analyze these different insights that they can collect. So I'll end it there. Thank you so much for attending the webinar, and hope you have a great rest of the day.